I don't tend to, when I'm alone, when I'm writing alone, I know it's going to be made into a film. I don't tend to write the emotionality in great
Mm.
details. It's very basic. Like I think there's some couple very basic emotions. Sad, happy, scared, frustrated. That there's a few like that's it. I'm ashamed. But even that's too nuanced.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in describing action
Mm.
because that's what your actor is going to do. I
Mhm.
don't like pre-assigning an actor's emotions in a script because I'm interested in present moment as a director. I'm
Mhm.
interested in whatever truth that comes out of that actor in that moment.
Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In our latest episode, Aaron Fullerton speaks with screenwriter-director Chloe Zhao about crafting her latest film, Hamnet, the art of adaptation, where she finds her creative inspiration, and much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and make sure to watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, here's Aaron in conversation with Chloe.
We are here on Third and Fairfax today, the Writers Guild of America podcast, with the incredible writer, director, producer, Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, whose new film Hamnet comes out in the holiday season of 2025. Thank you, Chloe, so much for joining us. I came to the movie as a giant fan of the book. I actually
Mm.
found it in one of those like little free libraries at the
Wow.
by the tree down in the little cul-de-sac at the end of my street where someone had their library, and I was like, oh, I think I heard about this on NPR, and took it home and read it and fell in love.
Mm.
And then going to a movie, there's always the will this live up to the book, or will this actually be as good as the book? And then there's this kind of third category, which I'm really happy to say Hamnet for me fell into, which is it actually enriched my love and understanding of the book. I feel like now my relationship to the book and the film are all kind of one thing that I can't really
Mm.
imagine one without the other. And that my appreciation for both is that much deeper because of their connection. So I guess I really just want to thank you for that. And then also just start at the beginning, a little bit of how this project came to you.
Well, wow, that's lovely. I'm going to tell Maggie you said that. That's such a great compliment for us. Hey.
Well, it's true. It's very true.
Mhm. We came to me, I didn't read the book, and it came to me from Amberlin. And my initial instinct was, I'm not sure I'm the right person for it because I'm not a mother. And so, but then I met Paul, who said you have to read the book. The book is not what you think it is. And so then I read
It's
the book, and
Paul Mescal, the actor.
yeah, Paul Mescal, and I loved the book so much. I felt Maggie was writing a story so much bigger about just losing a child. I mean, that is big, but it's not just about that experience. It's about what it means to be human. The sort of the whole spectrum of what it means to be a human being, completely raw and unapologetically. So I just thought, what an incredible container to go deep in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you uh, you adapted the book along with Maggie O'Farrell, the
Mhm.
author of the book. Can you tell me a little about the experience of adapting something alongside its author, and what the conversations were like as you two approached it?
I was very adamant that if Maggie doesn't want to do this, I'm not doing the film. So I told her, you don't have a choice. And so it was great working with Maggie. We became friends, and so she did well. First, I asked her if she's willing to rearrange the sequence of the book into a linear story for the screen, and she agreed, and she did the first pass. that was chronologically putting all the events together. And then I would do the next pass, distilling it. And then I would come up with scenes I think I need for the film. And I would leave her these really long voice notes describing what I'm looking for. And then she would write the scenes where she would pull things from Hamlet. You know, as you are someone who read the book, know that the book ends with remember me. And the issue is that the written language is so much older than baby film language, right? So the written language started so long ago. So when you have two black letters, remember me, on white page, and then blank, what does that evoke in the reader is not the same, cannot even compare to having an actor say, remember me, cut to black. Not the same. So we actually had to write 25 pages more of the play and everything that's happened in order to translate what that powerful ending that was in her book.
I mean, now that you brought it up, I'm gonna now we start at the beginning. Now I want to cut to the ending. I guess I the that was something too that struck me as well. The film is quite, I think, remarkably faithful to the novel in so many ways in terms of just character details and every little character intention too. You get to really expand that the final scene once we're in the theater, and it sounds like that was, very intentional in terms of bringing us into that emotional space, but it also brings us a little bit more as an audience into fully, I think, maybe more than the novel did, even kind of putting us in the place of understanding what Shakespeare's art was and what it meant. um, can you talk a little bit about that and how that what was the opportunity to dive into a piece as well known as Hamlet, but also, I guess, what were the pressures or freedoms of getting to play in that in the Shakespeare sandbox, even though so many, it's been played in so many times before?
I think Maggie probably felt a lot more pressure than I did because I did not grow up with Shakespeare. I know Shakespeare, but not very well. So it's a bit like when I made The Writer, I didn't really watch a lot of Westerns, so I didn't feel the pressure. My loyalty is to her book and to this story. But I think she and felt immense pressure there, which is great. I think somebody has to make sure we guard the Shakespeare's legacy. So for me, it was, I asked Maggie, I said, why don't you pick scenes from Hamlet? Like, we know we're going to have the final scene because he dies, right? So, and Hamlet dies. We want life and art within the film to have a parallel so that audience can process what they just, and Agnes can process what they just experienced on stage. So we knew the ending scene in Hamlet is going to be there. But I told her, why don't you pick, moments and stuff, scenes. And so she wrote about 25, 30 pages of that. And then and then bring Bartholomew and Agnes come in different times. And then slowly me working with her and our DP, production designer, the actors started to then shift it even more just to, make sure that we can cover it because it's quite complicated when you have something happen on screen and then somebody's going through a whole different catharsis off screen with all these audiences. And but the energy Maggie was writing and I were writing towards is this goal to dissolve the illusions of separations between Agnes and the world around her, between life and death, between what's on stage and off stage. So that's the sort of spiritual guide we had. And then once we had the last 25 minutes written, we then go back to the earlier part of the script and wrote scenes that can support that. Like, for example, the scene where Agnes and Hamnet were talking about what do you want to be. So I want to be player in my father's play, and that is, yeah. And then the sword fight improvised training that Paul and Jacoby did was added because of the sword fight scene in the end. So there's about then going back into the real life that the play came from, and then planting the Easter egg backwards. So it was a very circular process.
Yeah, well, and it makes it feel all very much of a whole in that way.
Yeah.
And I get another question too that goes to the kind of, I guess, my question about a process for how you approach the writing versus the filmmaking, and even the editing, and how those things connect. Um, there's, I think, I thought you did this really well in Nomadland too, where you have some scenes that can be very quiet, and it feels like we actually, in those quiet scenes, through performance, through your camera, it feels like we get very much into the interior life of the character in a way that novels always do, but film rarely does. But it feels like sometimes I wonder what's on the page in this moment. Does the script actually contain what we're supposed to be getting emotionally from this moment? How is it written on the page? And I'm curious, just as a craft person, how you approach that, how you can get some of those really novelistic some of that novelistic storytelling energy, that both
Yeah,
on the script and into your work as a filmmaker.
that's a very good question. I don't tend to, when I'm alone, when I'm writing alone, I know it's going to be made into a film. I don't tend to write the emotionality in great
Mm-hmm.
details. It's very basic. Like, I think there's some couple very basic emotions: sad, happy, scared, frustrated. That there's a few, like, that's it. I'm ashamed. But even that's too nuanced. I'm more interested in describing action, because that's what your actor is going to do. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like pre-assigning an actor's emotions in a script, because I'm interested in present moment as a director. I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in whatever truth that comes out of that actor in that moment. Even if he's laughing when he should be crying, I honor the laughing if I know it's true in the moment. That will always trump over the script. So that's me as a director. So when I'm writing alone, the script is not very readable. It's a little bit like, okay, Chloe, you could give us a little more. Oh, we'll find out on set. So when I have Maggie, which is great, and I have this source material, that the internal landscape is so richly described already, right? And then we have Maggie on top of that to add things. The script is just so much more beautiful than my own script, than my own director's script. And because the internal landscape is so brilliantly written in the book, it's actually, I didn't have to do too much of that kind of work, because all I needed to do is to allow the internal landscape to be on the page, and
Mm-hmm.
trust that whatever version of that is going to be channeled, because you still have to sort of give it a guide, right? But it's a lot more nuanced than just my basic emotions. And then the actors can take that and interpret that and then do whatever they want. But then once they're on set, whatever comes, that goes first. And then the next process for me, that is a way of writing, is in the edit, is doing the first pass of the cut, because I tend to be a very different person before I shoot the film and then after. Like before, it's a year and a half, usually people change, and it's really interesting to then go in to say, okay, what are we trying to say here? Most of the time the big things don't change, but how to get there does in the edit.
Well, that's another question I had, actually. It was kind of like how you're approaching the script and what's there versus how it comes together in the edit. For this
Hmm.
film, I also wanted to ask about the pacing, because I found it really unique in that in some ways it felt lyrical, but it also was also very grounded, and I was getting the information I needed. I didn't, yeah, it felt really unique, and I was wondering how much of that was the flow of that kind of was something that was part of the idea from the beginning and was on the page, or if it's something that was truly found in production, or once you got into the edit and found just what made
Hmm.
sense for the flow of it, or even if Max Richter's music helped to decide some of that as well.
I think I think when, as an artist, I think I'm always playing with these two energies, the masculine and feminine energy. And I think that I actually, it was so great. I did a dream work session before the shoot. I tend to become like right before shooting, I tend to like want to just blow everything up in the sense that I want to blow all the structures. I want to everything want to feel present and new. That's one of my, I think, strengths, but also sometimes could be a bit too chaotic. I just want things to be present all the time, right? And so around that time I did a dream work session, and from that dream work came out a phrase which is keep your heart open but trust the structure. And so that, and then my teacher was like, I think we're talking about the script, because I definitely went through like a crazy, I do that, I rewrite the whole script like right before we start shooting, and then but then it really helped me to calm down. Okay, in order for the water to go deep, it has to still first. In order for the water to be still, you have to have really structured banks. The container needs to be really strong. So my psyche was literally screaming at me saying, trust the script, trust the script, trust the script, and trust that your actors are going to be able to go really deep within the confine of the script. Because I come from the tradition of like, no, we can't restrain it. It's got to have to, like, interesting thing has to happen all the time. We need to be fully chaotic in the sense of no restrictions. But in this film, it needed the container, because our world is a stage. We wanted to contain the entire human existence within one frame, one stage, one backdrop. And that's when it goes really deep. So that was a very kind of definitive moment for me. And so I definitely trusted the script more on this film, and then while directing, than any of the films I've done in the past.
Wow. I'm also struck by what you said about the balance of masculine and feminine, because for me, actually,
Mm.
one of the things walking away from the movie was I kind of felt, and make of this what you will, this balance of the of you said, it's about humanity at the beginning, and I got to me it was about how infinitely large and infinitely small it is. Felt
Mm.
very present for me with the way that their characters were framed against nature, made like just the smallness of humans against this vast
Mm.
creation and earth that are around them. I felt that,
Mm.
but at the same time, the universes that existed inside these characters and inside the characters they were creating, of course, for Shakespeare himself, we know just how many stories existed inside him, but then for everyone else around him, just what universes existed
Yeah.
inside them, I was struck by as well. So that really resonated with me for what it's worth.
Well, that's so beautifully said, because to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That guy is a prophet to me. Uh, I
Well,
think he, yeah, I think he really, Blake is, I mean, yeah. So I'm just, thank you for saying that.
wow, no,
I
thank
love
you.
that. I'm always trying to see, because we are nature, and within a single cell inside of a human body contains the entire cosmos,
Hmm.
right? And because we came from the Big Bang, these vibrating particles, and this kind of oneness is what we're trying to achieve at the end of the film. That even when you get a glimpse of that oneness, some may call you suddenly feel one with the divine, and that's when all the fear goes away.
Hmm.
And that's when you're not even afraid to die, to let go of, it's we work so hard in the history of humanity to use various modalities to try to get to those little moments. It could be meditating forever, taking ayahuasca, whatever you name it, create, get together at a concert, let music get us to that oneness. That is what
Watching
we
film
are
together.
striving
Yeah.
towards. Watching film in a dark space, like
Mhm.
letting sound, image, story, dialogue, everything to vibrate us into this one frequency of emotions. That is, again, a form of church going, right? It's a different kind of, and we need that. Otherwise, we would constantly feel isolated and separated.
Absolutely. Art needs to have a soul as well, which I think this really comes through with. And so, and I'm, a big theme in this, and something that really struck me. Um, you know, I have recently lost someone in my life, and so I've been thinking a lot about how does grief become art, and how to channel grief into something productive and meaningful, and give it a space to live, and to become something outside myself. And I think part of the reason I was so attached to the book, and then found such resonance in the film as well, was the way that actually becomes very much a journey for Will as well. I'd love to hear a bit about you, and I guess you and Maggie together, your approach um, to that theme, and how much that felt like one of the kind of tenets of what this story was built around.
Mm. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I think Maggie's book really laid the foundation. When I say my loyalty to the book is that it's the job as a writer on this was so easy. We start writing in like February, end of January. We have the first draft by March. So easy because the book is so brilliant. And I think what the book and what we're trying to convey is that grief is an essential part of the human experience. It's something as natural as love. And we as a society might have lost some very instinctual tools to process grief,
Mhm.
because a lot of times it's in our body, and the repression and the control of our bodies for thousands of years had made the pain from grief almost unbearable, because we don't emotions, or the emotional pain, because we don't have the very simple tools that our ancestors have used to move emotions out of our bodies. And those methods has been shamed, has been deemed wrong. There's so many narrative around that. So when we don't have the space in our society, the tools, the kind of communal experiences, the teachers, the guides to help us to process grief, when the way to do it is so limited, and there's something wrong about it, there's some narrative about that there's something wrong with it, where you don't see in nature. Right? Maybe you don't see it with Agnes's mom, and even some way the way Agnes is talking to her children about the death of the hawk.
Mhm.
I think for Will, unfortunately, his family doesn't talk about it. Right? For him, he doesn't have the tools to express it, and thankfully, he found it in art.
Yeah.
Right? He found in channeling that out, giving meaning to his pain. That meaning is how he bring people together so they can all have the experience that he didn't have, the types of tools, the kind of like space being held that he didn't have growing up. So I think if you think about how much humanity is born out of I first foremost think we need to look at it as autumn going into winter. The more we can hold our grief and let ourselves feel it and handle that, the brighter, the more beautiful the summer, the more it's going to be, the more we're going to be able to love and live fully. Without one, there isn't the other. So the normalization of it, I think, is the first step. I don't know if that's answering your question.
No, it's honestly, I think it's asking a even bigger question than I realized I was asking. So thank you, and yeah, thank you for indulging me and for offering some wisdom. I'm thank you for indulging us. Um, this is, of course, the Writers Guild podcast, so I should maybe return back a little bit to
Yeah.
the writing and filmmaking. And I guess one thing, we're always interested in when we're talking to filmmakers and writers is knowing a little bit more about their influences as well.
Mm.
And I'm curious, as you approached Hamnet, both at script level and of course while directing, what were some of the really what were some of your influences in terms of whether other or films or narratives that struck you as particularly useful in conceiving this?
You mean in terms of books?
Oh, books, but also in other films or even
Mm-mm.
pieces
I
of
think
art.
yeah, so films, there's a list of films. There's well, first of all, Maggie and my favorite, both of we found out on our first Zoom, both of our favorite filmmakers Wong Kar-wai,
Oh, okay.
which
I can
was
see
great.
that. I can
I
see
mean,
that.
it's because I look at Maggie and said, I didn't know, how do you know who he is? And she's, I watch films, but the fact that you rarely, even with my colleagues in the film world, you don't always hear Wong Kar-wai.
Mhm.
And so then it made perfect sense because when I was reading her book, it feels like she's writing images and images and edited in the exact pacing of a Wong Kar-wai film. So, and it's so much that it is about the unspoken language, the interior, right? So the when people say, "Oh, it's hard to adapt a novel that is so interior," but I actually think it's really easy because I think we both were drawn to filmmakers who are silently sometimes portraying the interior world through the cinematic language.
Mhm.
That so right away that's Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love is something that we thought about.
Yeah.
And then the Zone of Interest was a big visual influence
Oh,
as well. Yeah, and also just in terms of like having the camera, we very much took we call the CCTV camera, and then it's again allowing the scene to play out, and to build a tension right within a scene.
yeah.
And we always think about polarities, like how much tension can we have between characters in a scene. Without the polarity in the scene, to me, it goes flat, especially if you're holding the frame.
Mm.
And then Mirror Stalker, big
Mhm.
influence for us. Barry Lyndon, Barry Lyndon, and Three Colors Blue. It's a beautiful film about grief. That was definitely in the back of my mind making it. Yeah.
It's so interesting you mentioned zone of interest in the what you call the CCTV, because that also some of those scenes in which you have the unbroken shot in that, um sort
Yeah.
of reminded me, like it brought me back to also the idea of being on the stage, the theatricality of where
Yes. Yes.
you're not in,
Yes.
like, we are now part of the audience watching it
Yes.
play out in real time, and
Uh,
that felt very
yes.
intentional.
Yes, I mean, watching Zone of Interest, the year after I heard, well, the year after I made, I heard about Hamnet as a project. I haven't even written the script yet. Was really important. Like that film came in a perfect time
Mm.
for me to go, oh, we can really push far visually on this one. Um, yeah. But also, there's another thing that I think is quite interesting in the writing process is that when I was working on the script, it was my turn, right? I couldn't quite figure out the opening. I couldn't, you know, of course, like there is opening in the sense like if it's a because we know we're gonna open with Anya's in the forest. We think we are. We're not sure if we should open with Will. For you know, I had such a hard time because the book opens with the the day of the Hamnet's death. So
Yeah.
that's such a great openings. But now we can't use it. And I struggled so hard. And when I don't have the opening, everything else just isn't falling into the same in place. So I called Maggie up and I said, were there anything like any music that you were listening to while you were writing the book? I need something, you know. And she mentioned of Purcell's As I Laid in Earth. As I Am Laid in Earth. Yeah. It's a opera. And then she said, I listened to that on repeat when I was writing the book. And because the line repeated over and over and over in the sounds, remember me, remember me, remember me. And she thought that he had seen the original production of Hamlet. She thought there was a correlation between that track, Purcell's track, and she believed that timing wise, that he could have seen Hamlet and the song was inspired by the original production of Hamlet. I said, whoa. So then I started listening to that song and right away the opening came to me, what is going to be. And then, so the script used to open with the song, that song plays, right? And then I went into the forest with Lukasz. A few months later, had that song blasting as well. And then Purcell song, yeah. And then we were filming, trying to find the language, the tree and everything. And then I also sent that song to Max, who took pieces of the song and created tracks from that. And I had that before I started filming. I was playing it out loud on set. So if it was actually inspired by the original Hamlet, like Maggie thought, just think about that kind of spiral way of creating an ecosystem and how one piece of music started the ending. And the end of the film used to end with the same song, you know, and to achieve the feeling of that ending, we needed our modern version of that song, which is On the Nature of Daylight. And so, yeah, I love this kind of almost like investigative way of writing. I think Maggie does that a lot. That's how she digged up this story. So even when we were writing, we feel a bit like a journalist, you know, a little detective. And I like working that way.
Yeah. Well, I think that came through. You know what, we can't prove it whether or not, but I'm just going to believe that yes, that opera was inspired by seeing Hamlet for the first time, so that this is all this is
Me
all part
too.
of a beautiful cycle of
Me too.
Shakespeare
Yeah.
over the centuries.
Yes.
I know we've pretty much
Yes.
run out of time. So yeah, you know, we'll skip some of these other questions because I know you have a really busy day. But I want to thank you so much for making the time to be with us, and congratulations on the film. It is beautiful, and it is I can't recommend it more to any of you listening or watching who have not seen it. I think it'll touch your heart in many unexpected ways. Thank you, Chloe, so much, and yeah, we look forward to what you do next.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.